Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Phil, as per usual, and today I am joined by Rebecca Courtney from AJ&Smart, and we're going to be talking about emergent facilitation. I think about facilitation and think about what I do and what I teach. Emergent facilitation always for me feels like a tricky thing to try to teach because it's
Uh-huh.
essentially as I kind of wrote down here as I was trying to think about ideas for this is it's like building the road as you're traveling down it, right? You're moving,
Yes.
you're building, you're kind of creating. So Rebecca, how would you define emergent facilitation? How does that maybe differ from other forms?
Yeah, really nice question as well to start us off. And by the way, hello, everybody. Emergent facilitation to me and to us at AJ and Smart, it's moving completely away from this rigidity of like agendas and having like the perfect plan. It's less about having all these perfect tools, techniques, and exercises and relying on them heavily, and more about being able to go with the flow and being able to adapt to what's happening in the moment when you're working with participants, when you're working with groups of people. So it's building up this kind of resilience, and what we call it is like unshakeability as a facilitator, so that when things don't go to plan, which is most of the time, as you know, as a facilitator, there's always something, right? There's always like tech issues. We just had a very funny tech issue moment, myself and Phil, before we hit record. There's always things, there's people in the room that might try to throw you off. So you need to have this level of unshakability and emergence in you to be able to just navigate everything as a facilitator. So yeah, that's what it is to me.
This I teach so many educators and I teach so many a large part of my work is trying to develop facilitation skills in public school educators. Let's say they're, you know, the formalized education model and facilitation, they are so almost separated. And it's very
Mhm.
challenging to try to get people back to that stage of like, as you sort of said, unshakeability. Let's go back to your origin. Cultivated your ability to be unshakable in facilitation. Is it just repetition? And what was it for you that kind of was that change where you could say, okay, now I can be emergent?
Yeah, I definitely think it is experience and repetition of doing, like actually getting into these rooms with people and groups and just, yeah, having these experiences with all these different challenges that might come your way or things that make you need to be adaptable and flexible in the moment. So experience is one, but it's not everything. You don't need to be fully experienced and have like 10 years facilitation experience in order to be an emergent facilitator. And what we teach at AJ and Smart is like the first principles of facilitation. So we set you up with like the principles of facilitation, understanding those, having like certain exercises in your back pocket and certain workshop recipes that you can just pull from so that in the moment when you're facilitating a workshop or a session, you're able to just, if you have an agenda written and it just goes wrong for some reason, you're able to not panic. You're able to look at the agenda and go like, okay, this exercise isn't actually going to work for this group anymore. So I need to just pivot now. And so you have like a toolkit of exercises and knowledge and techniques and stuff that you've learned over time to pull from and be able to just use that in the moment based on the group's needs. And so, yeah, my answer is experience is, of course, really good for you to build up that resilience and ability to just pivot and be adaptable, but also understanding the first principles of facilitation, understanding the skills and having your like toolkit bulked out a bit. And it doesn't need to be too jam-packed with loads of exercises and all of that. Having a small number of things that you can just like use on the fly is very important.
Let me ask you, like, I think that the toolkit, often reference like this idea of building this catalog that you can have where you can draw from. I like the phrase toolkit, and I also referenced that you mentioned workshop recipe. I like these kind of terms because it gets away
Yeah.
from what I've heard in the past, which is facilitation props. And a prop in itself is something that you do to lift yourself up or to lean on. And I would prefer people get good at the skill of the use of the tool, like rather than using a prop to support yourself and then you're not growing. Those are all maybe the physical components. I'd love to talk about the mental side if we can. When you're about to enter into a space, you're walking into, you haven't necessarily got an agenda, you're coming into a room full of strangers. What's your prep before, what's your work before the work? What do you do to get yourself in the right headspace to deal with the unknown? Because I can imagine for a lot of people listening, that's the scariest part. The agenda is what protects them, and maybe some of the tools, as you said, might also. But what's your strategy for prepping?
I think so prepping, this is such a huge topic at AJ and Smart at the moment because like I think our messaging over the last few years has maybe yeah, we were really heavily relying on exercises and this and that and having like everything sorted and having the perfect agenda, but now we're moving more into this emergence style of facilitation. So, but I will say that having all of those tools and recipes, that does give me that confidence to be able to step into any room and be able to solve any challenge for any team. So that like does, it's like a safety net for me. But my prep work is more about, yeah, like how I actually get ready for the in-person thing or any online training. I just look after myself a bit better. I look after what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, what I'm putting into my body. I'm not staying up till all hours the night before getting myself prepped. I'm making sure I have a good night's sleep. And this is something actually, another thing I do is a thing called priming. We just actually launched a video on YouTube. AJ and Smart launched a video on YouTube of our most recent training. We have a facilitation training. It's like a 5-day boot camp thing. And in this video, we talk about priming. So getting yourself into the right state of mind to be able to, yeah, be there with a group and hold space and energy for them. And yeah, my priming, I suppose, is, yeah, looking after my body, looking after my sleep beforehand, but also even just like hyping myself up beforehand with some music that just makes me energized. That also totally works for me. And then another thing that I do is when I get into the room with a group of people, before I launch into any sort of content or problem solving or any sort of facilitation, I want to connect with the people in the room first. And so, like, I design my workshop space so that it's built for connection before content. And this is like my biggest thing where I prime myself to get into the state to be ready to facilitate. And I do simple things like when people arrive into my workshop space, I will do like a visual check-in with them so that they can like draw and introduce themselves in portraits. So I get them doing that so they have something to do instead of just like hanging around and not knowing what to do. I also try to get to know them better on a micro level by having different interactive boards ready for them. And one of them actually is like getting to know who's in the room with me. So I have this board where I'll have it like in different sections. And I ask this question of what best describes where you're at right now. Are you a freelance facilitator? Are you working internally in a company facilitating, or are you just getting started? And people write their name on a sticky note, maybe add additional context and place it in there. And so that's like the start of my session. I'm just like getting to know people a bit better, and understand, like, yeah, connecting with them first so that I can just be more myself with them. That's a long answer, but yeah.
No, and I agree with so many points that resonate so much with me, because I think that one of the motto, or at least for the organization I work for, is connect, empower, lead, and connect is the first thing. And so I think that's always the intention. Is I think that too often do I see people try to go too quickly into content areas, but don't get to connect with the people beforehand.
Mm.
I was presenting at a conference workshop, and there were chairs all around the outside and an open space in the middle. And I wasn't wearing at the time any logo wear. And so I was sitting on the side, and people just thought I was another participant. And for me, that was like, and now I've been trying to figure out how to represent that or recreate that moment. Because for me, I felt like I was one of I was just sitting, people chatting about something
Mm.
else. I did the classic joke that I would do if I'm doing that, like, "Oh, I hope this presenter's good," and then knowing that that's me, like, but I will,
Love it.
I'll just have these kind of conversations, and I found value in that. So by the time I then start, I already have a few people, even in a group, if it's a large group, where I know a couple of people, so I know a couple of names. So when I can reference stuff, I can direct my attention to the people who I know their names already. So I think that there is so much value in
Hmm.
realizing that we are human beings working with human beings, and we have to go back to the human part before we ever go to the next
Absolutely.
step, right?
We forget that, right? And like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge part of my facilitation style, I would say. Trying to, yeah, be unapologetically myself the minute people meet me so that they then feel comfortable enough to be them and just to be able to be open and whatever. And another thing that I like to do as well if I'm doing like trainings, so I do facilitation trainings in person, but we also have a program online where I do some coaching and training in there too. But the in-person trainings, what I like to do is before we even meet, I do like a meet and greet beforehand online. And within that meet and greet, this is so important for me to connect with people straight away. I'm like, okay, who's going to be at this training? So I do this like lovely little session where everybody gets to know each other. But the whole thing is like based on an exercise called hopes and fears. Don't know, do you know it? But just like, what do you hope to get from this training? What are you worried about? So, like, yeah, like, are you worried that you're investing all this money and it's not going to be worth your time? And through that exercise, I gather so much data that is going to influence my facilitation and how I show up in that space with them. Like, the minute I meet them, then I'm kind of like, okay, so most people here are really excited about connecting with each other. So a lot of my training is going to be focused on creating moments of connection for them. And so, yeah, I think pre-talking to people also gets me in this state where I can be a bit more emergent and loose with my facilitation.
Let me come back to this like hopes and fears because I was doing a workshop and I did an activity called switch seats. It's just switch seats if, and I will
Mm,
give some prompts. And one of
yeah.
those was like switch seats if you've ever had a team building experience that you kind of thought was cringy. And like it's surprising how many people will say yes to that kind of stuff. So I wonder
Mm,
if like as well in the work that we're doing with connecting, we're trying to create buy-in, but also knock down some of the pre barriers that people are coming into the space with.
hmm
I think that our industry, facilitation, experiential education, so many different buckets for it. But I think that we've got, and I've thought about this for a while. I think we've got a bit of a marketing issue in that there's so much energy that comes into a space that's sort of like this. It's
mm,
like on a how do you combat that? Is that some of what you're suggesting? Is that kind of connection back to the human to be
hmm
able to get rid of the barriers? Like when you work with corporate groups, I do this often where it's like I feel an energy of like, oh, we're doing team building. Like it's almost like we've got to get past that. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
I have something to say about this. So
Hmm.
in AJ and Smart, we work with corporate clients, but we also work with individuals. So individuals who are looking to build their career in facilitation. With the people who are working, like the individuals, we don't need to do too much expectation setting or, yeah, getting them into the right state to work with us because they're already bought in because they're like, okay, I know your stuff. I know this. They are already bought in. You need to do a bit of like, of course, connecting and making sure they feel good that they're going to be spending time with you. But when it's with corporates, it's different. It's a different energy. A lot of the time, the people who are in the training sessions with you or the workshops don't want to be there. It's somebody above who's made them be there. And when you walk in, you can feel that. And so I was recently doing a training with a corporate client, and whoa, when I walked into that room, I went from doing like a training with individuals who bought tickets individually and they're super excited. And then I went from that to this energy, and I was like, oh, Jesus, I need to figure out how to build their trust. And so I did this exercise, hopes and fears with them. So, like, I had an agenda planned, completely scrapped it because I was like, I need to get them on my side. Did this hopes and fears exercise with them, pulled out a few fears that were very like a lot of people had said it, that lots of people were worried it was going to be a waste of their time. They had so many other commitments that week, they didn't want to give up their time for it. And so I just addressed the fears there and then. So I just went, "Hey everybody, like thank you so much for doing this exercise with me. I've pulled out like three fears that I just wanted to like address straight away." And I just talked, sat down at their level, like even still just in the room with them at the top by the stage. I sat on a chair, got down to their level, and I was just like, "Lads, I just need to talk about these things because I promise you I can mitigate these fears for you. And I just want every day that you're coming in here to feel like it's going to be worth your time." And once I went through those fears with them, addressed them all, and we had an open discussion about it, even the vibe completely changed. And then people came up to me, even they were like, was this like a tactical placement of an exercise? Like, did you do this just to get us? I was like, no, I honestly just wanted to see what you were worried about. And I hope that I've just like calmed you down now. And yeah, it just changed the energy. So I would highly recommend if you're facilitating with corporates who don't know who you are, who have very little time, do this exercise, hopes and fears. It's incredible.
I
Address
think
the
that
fears.
it aligns with, and you may be familiar with this person, Romy Alexandra.
Yes.
If you're not, then you should. But a good friend of the podcast, and one of the things that she'd referenced in an episode that she was on was this notion that I've used now, and she told me this probably like 4 or 5 years ago, and I continue to use this. But this idea of mining opposite experiences. So
Hmm.
mining is in
Never thought of
digging.
it.
So, like,
Yeah.
if you want to create a space where people can advocate and truly speak for themselves and share what they're really feeling, then you have to actually search for the negative. You have to search for the opposite experience. So instead of saying, like, what are the things you're most excited about for this workshop? If you just only did hopes and you didn't do the
Mm,
fears, then you aren't getting a full experience of what's in the room. And you're also not creating that sense of trust that they will have in you, that they can say, like,
mm,
hey, Rebecca, this kind of sucked, or I didn't like this. And that's okay for that to happen. Like, I think that as a facilitator, I think it's really important that we get that feedback and hear that. And if we're not looking for it, if we're not being intentional about it, then it's not going to come. And everyone will say, that was great. I wonder if this is, I'm intrigued about your thoughts on this, because I had someone say to me recently, Phil, I had such a great group yesterday. And my challenge to them, and I said to them, what made them great?
mm-hmm.
And what they ended up just finding what was great was that they were easy. You know, that everyone did
Mm,
exactly
okay.
what they wanted to do. They laughed at all the jokes. They loved all the activities. So it for them felt like it was great. And my challenge to them is I actually think that sometimes a group is great when it actually challenges you more, where you feel like you're going to grow and also you're going to hear more information from a group that's actually going to allow you to cultivate. Like if you do a problem solving activity or some initiative and they struggle at it and they argue, and that's actually
Mm-hmm.
richer for me than if it flows perfectly and they ace it, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
give me much to work with. What's your thoughts on the benefits of a challenging group?
Oh, this is a really, really great question. I think you're completely right. Definitely grow so much more in situations where I'm running workshops or trainings with corporate clients who don't know us as AJ&Smart, and where I have to, build up that rapport and really work for their trust. I definitely grow as a facilitator because yeah, you're more switched on, right? You're more like, oh my God, you're more relying on your intuition to pick up on vibes and everything. So yeah, I feel like these groups that are a bit more challenging do develop that unshakability in you because yeah, you have to just figure out how to think on your feet, and it just does something different to your brain, right? So it's like your brain is put into a different state of just like, okay, I need to be adaptable here. I need to be flexible and think about how I can make this experience amazing for this group of people, even if they feel like it might be shite. So yeah, I don't know. It does something different to my brain. So like how I'm just thinking about it right now, and you just got me thinking about a totally different thing is like when I'm working with easy groups, I'm focused more on like yeah, how to make it really fun and playful and high energy and all of that. But then when I'm working with more challenging groups, I'm thinking and focused more on, okay, how can I actually just use my emergent skills as a facilitator to really turn this around for this group? How can I make it really special for them, even though there's so many barriers in the way? Such a challenging one though, right?
Yeah, and I love the idea, like you were saying that, and I agree with that. Like when it's an easier client, I do my the challenge that I place to myself is energy. Like, how do I keep the flow
Mm,
going? How do I make it? How do I peak it? Whereas when it's a challenge group, I certainly am not worried about like how do I make the energy. I'm more about like how do I get general vibe buy-in? Like how do I meet them maybe where they're at and try to
yeah.
be more open with them about it. I think the reason I think that sometimes they end up being better, like this one group, and I'm not sure this is maybe it's a compliment of me, but not compliment maybe of the industry at large or the marketing of our own org or whatever. It was
Hmm.
like the number of people after this last faculty training where I had this very similar experience. They walked out. You could tell they didn't want to be there. It
Yeah.
was the day before the first day of school, so I understand they had stuff going on. And at the end, they said, I thought this was going to be really bad, but this was actually really fun. Like, take that as a partial compliment, but I'm also like, oh, okay, we didn't prime you very well if you thought this was going to be bad.
Hmm.
So I think that for me, it's the energy shifts and changes towards how do I create that kind of sense of safety, but I end up I get more benefit from that, and I feel like I'm more connected to that group when there's a challenge.
Mm,
Because I
yeah,
actually have to engage more, right? You don't have to be just standing off on the side and just kind of almost conducting the experience. You're actually more involved in the experience when it's challenging.
absolutely.
We've kind of referenced kind of like trust in the
Hmm.
process. Like how do you build trust in yourself as an emergent facilitator? Did you have moments, and can you think of maybe certain moments where things have not got sort of they're not going well, and then you were able to change it, and that kind of was like, yes, it does work. Like, what kind of things have you experienced in that way?
Yeah. Oh my God. So many situations where I've been like, God, this is not working.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, one experience was like working with a huge project. The amount that people paid for it was wild. And there was so much pressure on me to make it successful and everything. It was just like a lot of pressure. So that was like looming before I even went in there. And so when I got there into the room, I quickly realized, oh God, what I have planned for this group is not what they want or need at all. It's not what they need at all. That is actually very, very important. So like the calls beforehand and everything with the client, I created a plan. We created a plan together, which I thought was what they wanted. And when I got into the room, I was like, oh my God, this group doesn't need to go through another workshop. They don't need to solve problems on this challenge. They're exhausted. They're totally overworked because there was something super crazy on that week or something, or that month was wild. I knew that they just needed a break from everything and they needed to connect with each other. It was like three different teams who don't really get the opportunity to meet each other that often in person. And so this was one opportunity where they were all in the same room. So what I did was scary, like, but I had this feeling. I was like, I have to talk to the person who hired me and just say that this is my thought. I'm going to take it in a different direction. Spoke to the person before we started and said, I think that this group actually needs this, and this more of a team building type of workshop versus a problem solving workshop. How do you feel if we just go in that direction? Just leave it with me. Trust me, I promise we'll get so much out of this group today. We had one day. And yeah, the client was like, okay, because that person was obviously pressured from somebody else to get results. I said, I promise we'll get results. We'll get results together. I promise. And so I just went in a completely different direction, completely threw out my agenda, even though that was my safety net. I was terrified doing it. But as I was doing it, I was developing this confidence in myself of just like, oh, I'm so happy I made the right decision. We did like some team building exercises. We went for a walk. We got ice cream together. We still learned a lot about each other and like how to collaborate a bit better. And we also did like a little session on creativity. And it just turned out to be so nice. And it was one of those moments where it was like pinnacle of just like me going
Mhm.
from this rigid facilitator, sticking to the plan and making sure I do everything right, to actually, no, I'm going to go in this direction instead because I know this group needs something different. And so, yeah, like going with your intuition as a facilitator is also very important to lean into.
I think it really defines like what makes a facilitator, right? Like the facilitator is supposed to be a guide who's kind of crafting an experience with the people. And agendas are almost counter to the process. It's like much more of a lecturer based if you've got the agenda, and it's not focused on the individual humans that are in the group. So, yeah, there's been many moments where I've shifted an agenda or thrown it out. If anyone was to look at any agendas that I have, and maybe I'll at some point I'll show some folks like this is what my agenda looks like. It's just scrawled over. It's like it
Hmm.
doesn't typically follow it. And something I think that was really important when you say we're building trust is being very clear and being able to say to the client, like, just trust in my expertise. That's a very
Mm.
challenging position to be in, to be able to say that, especially when they've paid money. And it's like, I understand that value point of like, we've agreed with this and I'm going to change it. Like the last client I was with, I said, like, I am going to follow the flow of the group. And they were really hesitant
Mm.
to commit to that. And I think that that's something that is really important for us to be able to advocate for ourselves in doing, saying like, no, we are the experts in the room. If someone's going to pay for us to come in, we don't want to follow it, because if there's an agenda that can be followed, it's not trusting your experience as a facilitator. Anyone could do
Yeah.
it if there was an agenda to follow. And I think that's that facilitator shift, is that how do we as individuals best guide someone for a process?
Yeah, absolutely. And like what how I look at agendas now, it's completely different. Before I would have had like, in the morning we're going to do the sailboat exercise. In the like I'd have all my exercises like placed in a perfect neat agenda. And now I just look at it completely different. I look more at like a zoomed out version of the workshop itself. So like the structure of a workshop, we use this framework called the 4 Cs. And so with every workshop, any session that we're doing, we see that it's broken up into 4 phases, essentially. At the beginning, there's normally a collect phase where you're collecting all the data from a group. You're generating like ideas. Then the next phase is the choose phase where you're narrowing down things like ideas to go with. You create solutions and then you commit to an action at the very end. And so that's how I now look at my workshops when I'm doing them with people. I just kind of go, okay, and I present it to the client as well. I say, I'm not going to tell you exactly what I'm doing. I have this framework. It's called the 4 Cs. We're going to go through these 4 phases. And by the end, you're going to have some really good results. And that actually has been working really well versus promising this is the agenda. We're going to do this time. This does it. Like it never works that way. And you always end up disappointing the client if you promise them an agenda and you try to be a bird emergent in the middle of it and they're like, what's happening? So yeah, I just give them more of a rough idea of the phases of the session instead of that.
It's so funny because I so many clients will say, "Hey, can you send us an agenda?" And I often would say to them, like, if you saw the agenda, half of the stuff on it you wouldn't know what they are. They're like names
Yeah.
of stuff that ideas or strategies, and it's like I'm not sure that would help. It is interesting as well how like through my career I've like not only reduced my tool bag, like there's less things that I would carry with me and bring, but also if you looked at my agendas now, I like look back on them if I could find some old ones where it was like I would be like 9 to 9:05,
Same.
9:05 to 9:10. Like it was like pages. And I think partly I would do that as well, not just for myself, but it helped me make it feel like what the client was paying for was more legit. Like if
Yeah.
there's
It
a
made it feel
thing.
more valuable. Yeah.
But now, if I don't have an agenda, and I actually would challenge people listening, it can be challenging, right? But like sometimes the
Mm.
challenge is go into a program. You can write an agenda loosely, but try not to touch it. Like just
Hmm.
go in and read the group. I know I hate the read the group phrase. I kind of say that sometimes and I hate it because I'm not sure exactly I know what that means or how I would teach it. But like go in and just go with the gut of how the feel of the group is. Maybe have some strategies and have some buckets. Like for the next 4 hours, I'm doing connection for the next 4 hours, like that kind of bucket. Because that's
Yes.
really what I do now. When people say like, "Hey, how do you craft an agenda?" I'm not sure. If I'm honest, I even have one at this stage, which makes it feel less. It makes it also feel like I'm not prepped, like us
I
lazy
know.
facilitation. Like I have to justify, like, okay, I'm going to bring in this like uh, massive wedge of paper and a book but really I'm coming in just me. It's like, all right, well, I'm
You
here
have
now.
it all in it's in here, like, you have it in your head, and you just go with the vibe of the group, and, like, that's I feel like that's what we should all be striving for, the ability to be that emergent, the ability to let go of these rigid, strict agendas and plans that we think are so important. It's important to be able to have an idea of what you might do with a group, but like being able to depend on yourself and your intuition and the group as well is so important. And it's I know it's like next level facilitation, but it's possible to get there. It's very, very possible to get there. And that's what we're trying to teach people now in our courses. And how we actually teach it might be interesting for people to hear. How do you teach emergent facilitation? Very hard. However, how we're doing it is that we bring people into a room for like 5 days. We do a boot camp for 5 days, and basically we teach them the first principles of facilitation. So we teach them like discussions are visualized, discussions are sequenced. We give them some tools and techniques along the way. But straight away, like on day one, we throw people into a scenario like facilitate this exercise. So pick somebody in the group who's going to be the facilitator and just go. And so we just push them into these situations, like push them outside their comfort zone and see how they handle it, see how they adapt and recover in a very like high pressure situation, but it's also a very safe environment to practice this skill. And so that's how we do it for the whole week. We just come up with scenarios like we'd get them to facilitate a simple exercise, but have troublemakers come in and try throw them off and see how they respond to that, and then give feedback on how they responded to a certain situation. And you're just building up this unshakeability throughout the week. And by the end of it, they have more confidence to just like throw out that agenda, just throw it away and be like, okay, all right, I can do this. I can just pick a ideation exercise, do that because this is their challenge. And you just see the development in the week. It's crazy. It's amazing.
Love that. And I think what I'm liking as well, I do a workshop called Reflecting Skills and Methods, because I think that skills and methods are more important than the tools and the things that you can have
Mm,
and the activities. What I like and what I'm hearing is you're really focusing on the individual skills, strategies, methods, resilience, whatever the unshakability, rather than I'm going to give you this thing and this is going to be the catch-all. Like this is going to be the prop that's going to solve this problem. And now you can then be a facilitator.
mm,
That is, we know that's not the case. Like, and I
yeah.
hope people are hearing this. You know, we've got two experienced facilitators demonstrating vulnerability by saying that the lack of agendas makes us nervous, right? Like, I think that that's, because some people will say like, oh, well, you're like, how do you get to that? It's like, we're still feeling all of the same. It's just that we've had
Mm,
more opportunities to practice the vulnerability of being, okay, this isn't going. How do I change it? And you kind of need that. Like, you kind of need to build up that scar tissue of
absolutely.
things that didn't go well for us to be able to get better. And I love that you're creating that safe space to be able to do so. Wonder, Rebecca, if you could share, like, where can maybe people find more information about, like, where to learn this from you, and any of the links, and I will throw those all into the description as well.
Yeah, amazing. So I work for a company called AJ&Smart, and within that we have facilitator.com. So facilitator.com is where you can go and you can learn about what we do. We have a program called Workshop or Master, and that's where we teach people to become top 1% facilitators. So we're teaching people to be this emergent facilitator that can build up that unshakability. Yeah, so you can just go there if you want to learn more about us. And also you can check out my LinkedIn. I'm always posting content there all the time. And yeah, just sharing lots of activities and ideas around facilitation. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for your warmth and your excitement and your passion as you come into this. I think it's so important, that like the ability for us to connect with people. And I can sense it just from this conversation. And so thank you for being willing to talk to us on this podcast.
I'm delighted. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a nice conversation. I'm leaving with like so many more insights and ideas from you. So thank you so much for your questions. They were great.
Awesome.
All right.
And I'm going to stop